Boy, oh boy. As beautifully shot as this movie is, it is just sort of a bummer. Even compared to the standards set by the MCU during this era, it's not great. Like and subscribe and hit that notification bell. If you're new, check out the rest of the channel and let me know what you think. Let's dive into Eternals. To be perfectly honest, I was a lot higher on this film after my first viewing. I've held the opinion that the reviews were way too critical and that this movie has a lot of redeeming qualities. And I have to say, upon second viewing, I think I was wrong. This movie is a chore. I wouldn't even call it bad, but it certainly isn't good. It's just there, really. This entire movie is just so cumbersome. Almost every aspect of this film outside of the visuals are just incredibly dull. Everyone, including me, was excited to see what a prominent director could do within this studio. The MCU has a knack for hiring mediocre directors, for the most part, that they can just control. So for Eternals, they went out and secured Chloe Zhao, hot off her Oscar wins for Best Director and Best Picture, to helm this ambitious production. And unfortunately, beyond the visuals and just the pure scope of their production, none of this movie lives up anywhere close to the reputation that Zhao built with her previous films. Firstly, there are way too many characters introduced. This movie ropes in a whole slew of new heroes on a team that is double the size of the original Avengers. There is not near enough space or time in this narrative to flesh out that many characters in their initial outing. Speaking of characters, the vast majority of them are just plain boring. Our two principal leads, Cersei and Icarus, portrayed by Gemma Chan and Richard Madden, respectively, are two of the most personality-devoid main characters I think I've ever seen in any film of this magnitude. Whether it's the writing, acting, or directing, they are just so incredibly hollow. The movie tries to connect with the audience through their love story and their past together, but none of it lands. In fact, Druig and Makari's romance is way more interesting and engaging, and it's a very minimal portion of this story. In fact, almost all of the characters introduced are just black holes of charisma, save for a select few. I enjoy Kingo, Druig, and Phastos, and honestly, that's about it. Nobody is very entertaining. I will say the one thing I do like is that everyone has a different power. In the comics, all of the Eternals have the same set of powers, but each of them specializes in one. But in the movie, they're each given a distinct power, which I think helps differentiate them because it makes each character unique. And it also helps the audience because, as I just said, you certainly cannot tell their personalities apart. Moving on to the narrative, here's the thing. I think the bones of this narrative are very good. Having this group of people discover that their entire history is a lie and their memories implanted is inherently compelling. The whole basis of this story is around this nuanced predicament that these characters find themselves in. They discover their true purpose isn't what they always believed it was. They were created to support intelligent life on Earth, to help it progress forward, because the more intelligent life on the planet, the more energy there is for the planet to birth a new celestial being. And ultimately, this leads to a fracture in the group as they wrestle with the moral dilemma surrounding their mission. This is my favorite part of the narrative. Debating this question about whether or not if what they do is right. Is it right to allow millions of people to die so one being can be born? It's a difficult question. I also like the fact that Icarus is the true villain. I like that the group has detractors and he's a true believer in their creator and vows to do whatever it takes to complete this task, including turning on his family. The one glaring negative of the plot, though, is the Deviants. They were teased as the big bads of this story. In the comics, they are the rivals to the Eternals. They're arch nemeses. In this, they're an afterthought, to say the least. They could have been taken out of this film, and it would not have changed very much at all. The worst part is that the writers set the Deviants up to serve an important role and possibly serve a twist in the narrative in the finale of the film. But they just don't do that. The Deviants were betrayed by Arishem. He sees them as a failed experiment, and the Eternals are their rightful successors. He sends the Eternals to eliminate them and to fulfill their position. Crow, the main Deviant, after absorbing Ajak and Gilgamesh, becomes sentient. He realizes all of Arishem's shenanigans, and then Crow intervenes, and the movie sets the finale up like Crow is going to join forces with the Eternals against their common enemies, Icarus and Arishem. But they just don't do it. No, they just have Thena quickly kill Crow off unceremoniously, and hardly anyone remembers the Deviants are even in this movie. And while I do believe this narrative is compelling, again, at its core, none of the attributes of this movie that are meant to emphasize the narrative work. The characters are lackluster, the action is extremely forgettable, especially for a large budget film like this one, and man, is this pacing so sluggish. Like I said up top, Eternals isn't bad, but it isn't a movie I even enjoy talking about. Visually, it's probably the most beautiful movie in this franchise, up there with Thor Ragnarok, maybe? That's it. This studio knew it needed something fresh, something to kickstart this new era of Marvel, something to get this franchise back on top, and unfortunately, Eternals isn't it. And honestly, in a word, it's just boring.